Hey Planet Earth, Untamed Druid again, coming at you live. Video 15, calling it Land of Confusion. Um, I've tried to record this a couple times, so let's see if it works. Oh, and sorry I'm not wearing a shirt again. If that bothers people, I can like totally do that, but like I just generally don't wear shirts, so I'm not doing anything weird on my end, so yeah. Here we go. I got a pretty long thing written, and then I'll just jump out and jump back in. But so the world seems to be up in flames. So much hardline polarization and agitation. But why? Where does all this discontent come from? Where it's nothing new, or while it's nothing new, in what way are we corralling ourselves into our own pens? So, I just trying to talk about the polarization and agitation that seems to be going on. We've got lots of gun violence. I think I saw, it was probably a couple weeks ago at this point, but the gun violence numbers in Portland, Oregon have gone up like 800% or something. That's like what? And then polarization, the most obvious example is, Democrats or Republicans. But I think maybe even a better example would be the masks, because it doesn't come down to, it just comes down to what you personally choose. So it's like, that's the most obvious example of polarization, but the most contemptuous, like where you're actually opposing somebody, would be like our political system, so it's like, we're kind of obviously being poked and prodded by this huge media thing that's run by the people that run the government. So maybe that's why. Anyway, in the days of old, we the people, i.e. you and me, would have been largely illiterate, okay, and anti-urbanization, which means just everybody moving into cities, and both of these, being illiterate and being anti-urbanization, are remnants of centralized rule. Generally first thought of as with the Roman Catholic Church taking over Druidic and Frankish and Spanish, and they weren't Spanish at the time, but taking over the lands of the original tribal peoples and then turning them into France and Spain and England. There were people that lived there before, and it's a hypothesis of many people. Michael Sarian's number one on the list. I just mention him all the time because he's the person to go to, because he's presenting the facts objectively and he's got the information. But he can go into this kind of story more. But so basically, because of centralized rule, people didn't really have access to information. They didn't have access to books or writing or trade numbers or anything like that, because they weren't a part of it. That wasn't a part of their everyday life. Their everyday life was just doing the work that needed to be done, and there wasn't huge school systems like there are now. There wasn't giant information sharing that's going on. So there was very little information for these people. So your run-of-the-mill average person was probably intelligent in ways, and probably bodily intelligent, or they could very fine motor skills or whatever. It's not that these people were completely incapable, they just had no education system. So and I just mentioned that because like when you're thinking of the past, it's easy to be like, oh, those people were stupid, but it's just like, it's like just looking down a hill and thinking the people at the bottom of the hill are stupid. It's like, no, they're just at the bottom of the hill, so they just they're just less further along. and it's important to take the people's perspectives into account, when you're thinking about history, instead of, assuming you could have your opinions in history. If you would have existed back then, would you have been able to even express your opinions, or would you have had to fall in line, or would you have had to fight? Would you stand up and fight, if that's what your opinions would tell you to do? It's like, and if we're at a point now where we can be heard, we need to be, excited and like happy about the way things are and the things that we've built our society on that have allowed us to get to this point. If we're gonna, at this point, just throw it all away because it's not perfect and we still have to continue to work and, improve things, it's there's just no reason to do it, because there's already a foundation there. There's already a building. There's already a structure there, and we can use what exists, but, interpret it in a modern way that acknowledges, what the framers' perspective would have been correct about, while also obviously having so many faux pas because of, just basically this conditioning that goes on where, we have all these necessary evils that aren't really necessary, but we just do them, and it's this giant web of lies and deceit that's going on, from slavery to, everything else. Kind of off on a branch here, one sec. So when I claim that people were illiterate and anti-urban, it doesn't matter, that we are, for the most part, literate and urban. There's people that live in the country, I'm from a country town, so, people are from the country still, but, there's huge pushes, huge waves of people that are purely urban. They're born in urban settings, and they have no connection to country life or farm life or anything like that at all. So the neighbors put their dog out for the first time, and it just keeps barking. I'm gonna keep doing the video because it's not stopping, but yeah, that's what's going on in the background. Sorry if it's like sounds torturous. It does to me, but gotta pump out the videos for the, so I can eat. Yeah. Anyway, in order to follow, okay, so yeah, it doesn't matter that, we're literate and we live in cities at this point. It doesn't matter that that's our context, because we can still understand, the past, but we have to be able to forego our current opinions and understand that different opinions make sense during different situations, and that, again, the hardline polarization of thinking, no, this is always true and I would always stand up for this, it's like, well, if you were surrounded by no one that agreed with you, would you still have that opinion? Like, basically it's like that idea where it's like, you can assume yes, but, according to the past and what actually has happened, that's not true, so, anyway, yeah, so in order to follow the trail of cause and effect, we have to be able to understand how the world would have been interpreted by illiterate and anti-city peoples. Without imbuing the past with life, it's easy to fall into ideas that support your own life experience, so, if you're, a part of the current social justice warrior movement, it's like, you can do that. And I'm not even saying don't do it. I'm saying it's a privilege for you to be able to do that, because there's countries where you would just be like, thrown in jail, and like tortured, and like just not even, there wouldn't even be media coverage of it, because it's just like, yeah, we just took down these, protesters, and we just like completely, eviscerated them. So they're, the fact that you can have like an opinion and influence, you can change people's minds, that's huge. So, not acknowledging that is like, well, why, you really don't understand what it means to be, you know, at least semi-free, there's, yeah, different places in the world where they're not free at all. Um, and this isn't one of them. The U.S. is a pretty free place in most regards. Um, so, so why were people illiterate? In general, reading and writing was developed and reserved for the priests and then the scribes and the merchants, and it worked out via that mechanism. Generally, the priests um, used writing as a means of communing with God, and some peoples even believe that every single word is like a special message, and all of the letters are representatives of different aspects of God, which is only perceivable through thought, which is preserved in numbers and words, but also like images, like in hieroglyphs or hieroglyphs, hieroglyphs. There it is, hieroglyphs. Anyways, so yeah, basically, writing is a mechanism of abstraction of thought reserved for people that are ensconced within the machine, if we should want to call it that. It's something that you don't really, that there's no real need for in actuality, because we can interact and live without it, but not, it's definitely needed if you're going to have a giant civilization, or if you're going to try to run a government, or if you're going to try to have a separate understanding of the world parallel to a normal understanding. And like these people ensconced in these institutions are going to have like, they're just going to live on a different on a parallel world, because they just have completely different understandings, because they're able to read, and through reading use metaphors and analogies to basically speak in code to each other, because it's more advanced than just basic speaking. It's based on leveraging meanings based on seeing them represented through physical words. But anyways, so people were illiterate because it was a job to learn. Not everybody learned things, so only these people in these special positions were learning things at all besides how to do work, and then they learned what they learned so that they would kind of separate themselves from your average worker. And merchants, they're just keeping records and things, but they were the first like more normal average people using writing, and it was much more shorthand and just numbers, and they just keeping track of stuff, because it was just through trade that it was necessary. So anyways, this control and centralized themes, because it was basically religion that founded writing, or just people trading. So there wasn't a lot of avenues for writing to be generated. It came from religion, or it was a mercantile thing. So with that limited, there's only so many ways it came about, and they had complete control over the writing systems and all of the rules and everything. So limited uses for reading and writing for the common people. Yeah, like the control. Yeah, okay, sorry. The control and centralized topics limited the uses of reading and writing for the common people. Um, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Without large public school systems, the exposure common folk had with information that was in any way intellectual was non-existent. Of course, there are exceptions, but they are based in a given individual being a seeker. And after seeking long enough, many of these types will either be killed, outcast by society, or influenced to join an establishment. So, and then from here, we can see that the commoners have been co-opted not to pursue intellect, as their friends and family members who did disappeared one way or another. This justifies the waves of anti-intellectualism that we're experiencing currently. This also explains the obsession with officially qualifying as whichever profession to justify intellectual pursuit and interest. So, yeah, basically, the commoners were just these people that were deprived of any mechanism of really expressing themselves abstractly besides through art. They couldn't really think in words, and communicate in words written down. Even that basic, just having the ability to write, it was something that was saved for the very elite. So the commoners are just, these are just basic people that can't read, can't write, and they're just doing work. And so from that perspective, there's, and these people still exist, or the remnants or the descendants of these commoners, and there's been more influence and, people we read and write now, so it's like obviously not as important, but it's like in a much more recent timeline than we think, there were people just not reading and not writing and having no influence or interest or ability to know these things at all. So it's like, it's thinking that it's weird that people make, pretty interestingly bad decisions on a regular basis. It's just like, well, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, we were fucking, licking rusty cans, we just kept beans in rusty cans and just ate them, and just, anyway, it was just different. So, yeah, and what I'm saying is that there's a level of distrust in intellectualism that still exists, and that is a remnant of this, centralized fear-based thinking. And then with the officially qualifying, just, the obsession with going to college, getting your degree, to be a whatever, instead of just knowing what you need to know to be that person or to be that job, and then just going and doing the job. Now it's required that you get the degree. It's not required that you actually know something, it's just required that you get the degree, and then, like, if you know something, that's good too, but you have to have the degree to qualify. And, it's just like, well, see how that gets in the way, and it creates this, illusion of, well, they got the degree, so they must know what they're talking about. And it's like, or you can just be good at flaking through school, and, it's, yeah. Anyways, I'm pretty passionate about that, so, it's, what I'm talking about is like the year 1000, like the Dark Ages, and then, as we're moving towards the Renaissance, and people are starting, like, there's printing presses that are being made, and, they're passing out Bibles and shit. Intellectualism was still seen as evil, so there's still people that are, clinging to illiteracy, even through the Renaissance, like up through, long time, up through like the 1800s, there's just people clinging to illiteracy as a form of strength, and anti-establishmentarianism. and that only very recently went away. Um, yeah, people maintained illiteracy or anti-intellectualism as a means of maintaining unity in their communities and for self-preservation. Um, so it wasn't good. Everyone thought it was evil to be intelligent. Um, thought it was negative. They thought it was bad to be intelligent until sometime in the 1900s. Um, this fits hand in hand with the commoners' rejection of urbanization, as cities being the basis for markets, churches, and businesses, etc. Uh, living there would have required slash encouraged people to fall into intellectualism in order to survive. Just to have any of those jobs, you have to fall into intellectualism, and that would make you evil. Um, so just living in a city puts you in a situation where you have to become evil in order to survive there. Um, Now, remember commoners' long-standing disdain of intellectualism. Intellectualism. That sounds so weird. Man, that caught my ears so weird. Intellectualism. It sounds like it's just like blah, 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 blah. Anyway, um, yeah, the commoners' long-standing disdain of intellectualism is that it justifies othering. Basically that's what intellectualism is. Being taught in schools, you're being taught how to distinguish all of the different things that exist. And, the commoners had no access to that. So there was no distinction between any things that exist, if you can understand that. So, like, when you go to school and when you're being taught, when you become intellectual, you're very good at distinguishing difference and establishing value, which, you can call that racist, you can call it whatever you want, but what I call that is, not necessarily bad. It's the applications of it, it's like, you need to be able to distinguish things, and it's, so intellect isn't necessarily evil in my book, but it's just the commoners viewed it as evil because of the chain of events that would follow. If somebody was obviously smart, they would either get killed or scooped up and taken off, and they would just lose a family member because he was smart. So they didn't really like smarts. And beyond them even not liking it, it just negatively benefited them. It negatively benefited your health to be smart. So there was just like all around lack of incentive to be actually smart. So intellectualism justifies othering, and it like kind of enforces othering or permits it, and it even permits slander and killing. It kind of encourages it and doesn't really have a moral framework. Once you gain intellectualism, you kind of generally will just step out of being maintained within a moral framework because you have your own valuing system. So you think that you can value, like we as individuals assume that we can value and correctly interpret everything, and it's just like, well, we're obviously extremely limited beings, so that's why it's not unlimited. That's why intellectualism isn't unlimitedly good, because we can pretend the more we know, the more control we have, but it's we just, that assumes that we have control in the first place. Yeah, in the commoners' minds, requiring modernization was requiring information or information to take the place of fellow humans as far as valuing system goes. This inevitably leads to a nihilistic, divided, and contemptuous community, which can't be sustained. As we can see, their fears are at least being partly realized. What's up? As everybody's gotten smarter, I look around, everything's pretty nihilistic, everything's pretty divided. We're talking about polarization, everything's pretty divided. And everybody's pretty contemptuous, I would say. You know, if you've been out driving recently, you know, you can see contempt firsthand. Um, you know, so these people, you know, it's not that I'm against intelligence. It's just you can see how, you know, the commoners weren't wrong. You know that, you know, everybody being smart, or at least indoctrinated into going through a school system, you know, it encourages people to act as if they know everything because they went through a system of knowledge, which kind of encourages them to believe that they know everything, at least about one subject, especially if they do well. So, you know, there's just a problem with, you know, the system and intellect in general. But, you know, like, what should we do about that? Because I'm not suggesting, you know, everybody should be stupid. Um, in the postmodern era, in the postmodern era, suggesting that we should all be anti-intellectual and anti-city living is a good way to encourage people to not listen to you. And I understand that. So, as I see it, the way forward without implosion is to, as effectively as possible, counter what is overly present. You know, so intellect should demand humanity, and humanity should demand intellect, because, you know, intellect, you know, is the driving force of cities, you know, and it's a human facet, you know, intellect. So we can't demonize intellect. You know, it makes sense. It totally does. You know how it's been, you know, lauded over us and like used to create this, you know, huge labyrinth of complicated just things that bear down on us every day. It's really easy to have disdain for, you know, intelligence or any kind of complication, but, you know, it's a part of being human. So, you know, there's got to be value to it. Nothing exists without value, or without utility, I guess. So with the commoner's biases visible, you know, intellect breaking down the community, and cities making people unable to provide for themselves, and also making them narcissistic, we can correct our relations towards people and things that we other. You know, so, you know, the bias towards intellect. So if you find yourself being like, I'm a smart person, generally being a smart person will break down your relations to other people, you know, unless you apply direct attention and concentration and try to maintain your relations. You know, you just having intellect or being an intellectual person, will, you know, more than likely break down, at least, you know, and this is a bias, so you don't have to read into this fully, you know, but that's just the general idea, you know, that communities can't function if everyone is existing on various levels of intelligence, you know, and there has to be kind of a quotient. Otherwise, you know, there's just it's too strong of a power structure, and it's based on just someone's ability to abstract. So it's not, it's too strong of a power structure without such a physical justification, you know. So it's just too weak because there's nothing to enforce it. So it's like a mental prison. But anyway, so it's the institutions of intellect which permit assassinations, othering, ritual killings, etc. Not intellect itself. Not intellect itself. You know, like not an individual person saying, hey, you know, this makes sense. You know, it's an entire institution around the concept of, you know, intellectualized knowledge that permits it. So what I'm critiquing is not the ability of an individual to know things. It's not the ability. It's nothing like that. It's what we do to facilitate order, and these, you know, these institutions that we create don't necessarily, they provide order, but they don't necessarily give accurate information, or, care if you're correct or not, or care about you in any way besides to suck money off of you and then to push you out into the world and, kind of hope you fall on your face so that you, need some kind of medicine, because they're partially funded by the fucking hospital that they have on campus. So they're trying to get you now addicted to medicine because, oh, you weren't able to be a successful worker. Well, you can be taken care of by the government, and then we can give you medicine, and then we can, it's just, there's so many things, just working against everybody. And most of what the things are, it's some abstract thing. No, it's human institutions that are working against humans, and that's what we need to talk about, because there's a certain level of intellect that can exist where you're like, oh yeah, we can just take advantage of these stupid motherfuckers, we can just rob them, we can just drain them of their life force, and that's okay, because we're smart. And it's just like, being smart doesn't mean anything. That just means you went to school. It just like, in a survival situation, you wouldn't be able to survive. So you're only able to be smart and exist as a smart person because of everybody around you and everybody that provided this, uh, like the forefathers. So to not recognize that and to just step all over everything, you know, um, you don't have any connection to community or to your fellow humans, so you can go ahead and do that, but like, when in the end, when no one's supporting you, it's no wonder why. um, yeah. Next, cities don't deprive people of skills. I'm not anti-city. Cities are needed hubs that allow people to cover the earth and to, commune with each other. So cities are sweet. I really like the city. I don't like concrete jungles. I like it when there's trees and, it's like naturalized cities. Like I mentioned Portland earlier. I used to love Portland. It's a really, really cool place. It sucks what's going on. Um, yeah, what deprives people of skills and the sanctity of life in general is the existence of and constant deferral to a centralized intellectual structure, be it the church, be it, the judicial system, whatever you want to call that, be it fucking just science, deferral to a single institution having all power and always being correct in all regards and having access to all knowledge. It's just, that doesn't exist. That's just a human conception. They know everything that is known so far, and it's like, so no one can know anything that they don't know. It's just not possible. It's just a human. We just sign up for it. We just sign up for the dynamic of, yeah, we just can't know, and they just do know, and so they're just, we just listen to them because we're just useless and can't possibly know, and they're the ones with the words and the magical ability to understand, so we just need to listen to them and, just throw ourselves, just get drunk every fucking day and, just get high and fucking, just lay around, just go to the park and just sit and then go home and watch TV and then go to bed. And it's just like, well, no, these people exist. There's these people that exist that are trying and actively succeeding to attack other people legally, drain their life force, make money off of them, ruin their whole lives, just destroy these other people, and they're just, hunky-dory. They're just totally fine, taken care of. It's all legal. It's all written. It's all nice, and, they got them to sign a signature without reading it and didn't look and say, oh, you're gonna be giving me something that potentially encourages me to kill myself. It potentially encourages me to commit suicide. Prozacs and whatever, SSRIs and shit. Just, you know, um, yeah, it's this illusion that the control that exists, or the calm that exists right now, is worth anything besides, these big intellectual institutions or corporate institutions just like coming in and just like raking us over the coals and just draining us of everything that we possess. And we're with the economic system, we're just like forced to have to work every single day, and then the money is taken from us by these fucking intellectual institutions that just like are in bed with the people making the laws. So everything's just being tilted and tilted and tilted until we don't have anything. We're at such a finite point where we make money, work all day, spend money, on gas and food, you know, and we don't really have anything for ourselves. We're just spending money constantly. We're spending money on going to the hospital. We're spending money on this. We're spending money on that. And it's not that, it's bad. It's a bad system. It's just that there's no reason that an individual person should have to take care of themselves in that way if we're not going to insist that that happens across the board. It's like that level of like self, ability to take care of yourself is huge, is very important. But it's obvious that certain people that are beyond a level of success no longer think along those lines. And what I'm saying is that that is not okay. We can't have people actively thinking and behaving as if they're separate realities, just completely parallel to each other. That makes it so that there's completely different communities that have completely opposing viewpoints. They have, and they actually believe each other to be lesser or different. So we're creating this environment where we have completely non-compatible people, even though we're all just people. They actually think that the other person is evil or the scum or the devil, and but both sides are doing it back and forth. So it's and it's a direct result of this illusion of control. Because you wouldn't be able to have these thoughts if we existed in an actual place that was like, a bad place to be. You wouldn't be able to have complex abstract thought. You would be happy that you were alive, and be thankful for every day. You'd be much more gracious. But because there's this fake control, there's just this calm and peace, we can take advantage of it and create all this uproar. So yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. And then with the current mask controversy, uh, you know, it's repealed. Most places, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. I don't wear a mask, but there's people that are scared, about it. They're just like, whoa, what about the Delta variant, the DV, you know, um, and it's not even to make a joke about coronavirus and pretend like it's not serious. It's like, okay, no, we're gonna, it's serious. It's a real disease. It exists. It's serious. The issue isn't wearing or not wearing a mask. It's that people will hardline default to whichever pole they find strength in, and that's a direct result of, the past, whatever thousands of years of centralized systems encroaching on our ability to express ourselves and take care of ourselves in a way that is genuine, like having any kind of autonomy besides, just fall in line and just be reduced down to a number and be reduced down to what you contribute, and don't really speak up too much and don't get out of line. And, it's like, well, geez, it's like, well, why would, there's obviously going to be resentment that's caused from that because, as humans, that just causes resentment. And it doesn't, it might not be mature, but it's just like, yeah, you can't just assume that people will be mature. Like, that's immature of you, like to assume that people will just mature themselves because that's what's responsible. It's like, geez, like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the dumbest thing. It's like people only mature themselves through community and through groups and through the people they look up to, and that's why you have to have a master, because you actually do have to have one. But it doesn't have to be your specific master, and you don't have to give them your whole life and your whole value. You can, that's, I disagree with lots of, just any initiating a master-slave dynamics. I don't, everybody's an equal. People just have different levels of awareness and, different versions of understanding. So, any kind of superiority is not taking, it's not holistic. Any superiority, any aspect of superiority at all is just anti-holistic. Yeah, I would say the key to these kinds of questions and these just kind of thought is focusing on one thing, which is self-expression. And you know the main thing that matters for an individual is to be able to express yourself. And or it should be. Maybe it's not. Maybe you value something else. Whatever. I'm not going to tell you what to value, because that's your self-expression. So, like, to me, that's what matters. You being able to do what you think that you're supposed to do. And like, we can come up with other more specific things that matter. But I think that comes into, trying to dictate what everybody should do. And there's billions of people, so we can't really dictate what every single person should do at every second, because there's no need to do that. It's just it's a fear of human nature, and not understanding, that we, deviant people need help and exist, but they're deviant because of deviant forces in their life that exist because of how we exist. We've got all these, government forces and, just institutions that are pushing and pulling us and like fighting with us and like bashing our brains out, trying to control every single thing that we do. And it's like, you don't think that might be why people have resentment and fucking do all this fucking crazy shit, and how it's like, it's like we're so pitted against each other under the watchful eye of this, like, of Big Brother, and it's just, we're just allowed to hang out with each other, but we're not allowed to have access to food unless we like do work that's like not related to the food. It's like we're all of our attention is being diverted into how can we do what these institutions want us to do. And because the institutions own all of the institutions, it's really hard to discern, because it's all one giant thing that's just pushing us and taking advantage of the fact that we exist so that it can benefit itself. It's a giant parasite. And I just don't think that I'm not a full anarchist, but I don't think the way forward, with all of that, what I just said being said, I don't think the way forward is to make the parasite bigger and just give it what it wants. I don't think disarming the country is a good idea. Just based on the fact that these institutions just suck the lifeblood of people, and it's not about you actually qualifying. It's not about you actually being smart. If you do well in school, it's not to take anything away from you, but it's only so many people can do well, in all of these systems. That's what the big issue is. That's why I get so upset, because only so many people can do well. That's the natural limit of the system. There can't just be unlimited success. There can't. So it's like, yeah, we're encouraging everybody to like do this stuff and act this way, and it's like, yeah, but for no reason. There can only be so much success. For economic systems, the more money that exists in the economic systems, the less an individual dollar is worth. You know, so if there's a single dollar that exists, it's worth $1, you know, but if there's $10 that exist, each dollar is worth 10 cents, you know, because the value that exists, the single dollar never changes, but there's different, you know, now that there's $10, it's each dollar is worth a tenth of a single dollar. So it's just like, just based on that, that's the idea of money. That's the idea of the money that we use, you know, so that like every single thing that we're engaging in is just encouraging us to give our power over to these institutions, and then to just, you know, to just turn off and to just not think about anything, and to not push, you know, to not ask any questions. So, you know, I'm asking the questions, I'm pushing, and I'm glad you guys watched the video, and thanks for joining me, and hit the subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and I'll catch you guys next time.